Well, okay, my outstanding friends, this is going to be great. I was just getting started to go over some of these sculptures and things that are here. They always consider them sculptures, but if you read Ovid, he talks about how the gods turned these things, these creatures, and all kinds of crazy things. Like this is a guy that's part of a mushroom, or look at that. I mean, it's just insane. Look at that little mushroom feet on it. I don't know what it is, but this is what Ovid said they did, the gods, long ago, literally just because they could do it, and they did it. And they made actually sculptures of them in gardens and everything else. And I show this quite clearly. In the other video I just did, I think it's just been put up there. Anyway, just as I'm started, my buddy Andy calls. Andy is a triple PhD. I know I don't usually say much good about PhDs. I don't mean to be nasty. I just anyway. Andy's a triple PhD, but he is a material PhD. He's a triple PhD. He's a bacterial engineer. He owns a company that runs a bunch of laboratories that they monitor the food service, the factories in big food production facilities, so that they monitor to make sure the food supply is good. And we're talking back and forth a bunch of different things about how we might be able to monitor bacteria and so forth in a more effective way using spectroscopy and AI and all. There's a lot of things, but he's a triple PhD in bacteria. It's serious stuff. So I'm going to get him on the line, and he won't be able to see the pictures, but he's very familiar with my work. Now, I'm just going to let him ask me questions. I'm going to treat it just like he never even knew anything about my work at all, so that you will be privy to my explanations. I told him that that's how we're going to do it. I'll explain to him just like he's never heard of me. And that way he'll ask me questions of things that he may have never even understood in the first place, because I know there's some things he's a little foggy on, as we just talked a few minutes ago. So I'm going to call him back now, and you can listen into the conversation. As we're going through the conversation, I may flick a picture or two here. I got a whole ton of them queued up because I was going to do this. But the pictures don't mean much. Look at this. This is just the weirdest thing. You ever see anything like that? Who the hell would do that? Who the hell would do something like that? These things are all over the stuff I'm going to show. Look at that thing. That's for my wife's garden. I got to put it in a frame. Now, well, I guess we'll get started. Okay, my good friends, I got Andy Marino on the line with me. Andy and I go back quite a number of years here. And he is the guy I just talked to you about. He's a bacterial engineer, and he's a triple PhD. I know he won't brag on his own, so I'll do it for him. And he understands the mud fossils. So far, am I correct, Andy?
That's right. Go ahead.
Okay, so now he wants to know, as I want to know, how does all this stuff work? Where did it all come from? What's the deal with all these dragons and monsters and giants and all that stuff? So he's got a theory, or he's looking into a theory about. Well, Andy, you say what you were telling me about between Mars and Saturn, you said, right? The asteroid belt you're talking about?
Yes, Roger, there's a theory that the asteroid belt that currently exists between Mars and Jupiter is a remnant of a planet that was destroyed. That planet, according to some legends, was the home to giants and dragons. There is fossilized evidence of a gigantic dragon in the northern part of Africa that you discovered and you've highlighted for years. That dragon was killed with an incision to their neck, that creature's neck, and died there next to a giant fish. That's evidence. That's physical evidence. My question is, did those dragons come from that planet that was destroyed? Roger.
Okay, that's a good question, Andy. I get assaulted with that all the time. What the hell? They couldn't eat. They'd walk around the planet in 10 minutes. You know that kind. And I agree. What am I going to say? Now, however, I do agree with you that they almost certainly had to not be just living around here all the time in that size. Now, you do know that if you read Ovid, and I know you've seen me talk about Ovid, how the first two lines in his epic work say that these gods, who pretty much all of them at that time were in this godly form, they were even dragons, they were still gods to whatever you would consider a god, but they were able to in his epic work, he says they could change themselves into anything they wanted. And as a matter of fact, I got some pictures. You won't see these, but I'm going to put a couple of pictures up here that show the kind of wacky things they could, you know, if you could see this, Andy, it's a contorted guy looking up and going, ah, and he's growing like a sea creature out of his body. And they did this for fun. They literally did it for fun. That's what Ovid said. And in the Garden of the Gods, they have just gigantic creatures. Now, where they came from, there's a story in, I don't know if Apollodorus had this or not, or Hesiod, but if you look through the lineage, and it is what it is, the lineage of the gods, Zeus was supposed to be an offspring, I believe, of Saturn. So Saturn was superior and a bigger god, and at one time a physically bigger god than Jupiter, who is Zeus. All right, so you're with me so far. There's a lineage coming down with the gods. One's overtaken his father. Each one overtook his father. You're aware of this, how the dragons ate their children, right?
Go ahead.
All right, so the dragons ate their children, and it talks about, even in the Bible, it talks about in Revelations, the woman standing on the moon and giving birth on the moon, with her feet on the moon. And the red dragon swooped in to eat the child. And it was taken into and was hidden for 360 days or something like that. In a cave. Now that is exactly the same story of Zeus. That's what happened to him. He was supposed to be eaten. I believe it was Zeus, and he was supposed to be eaten, but he was whisked away into a cave, and I forget who they were. There was some guards that were guarding him, and every time he would cry, they would smash their shields, go bang, 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 bang on their shields so nobody would hear him cry, because he was supposed to be hidden until he came of size where he could do something, and he did. Now, apparently, he raised all the other titans. I'm pulling this out of the air, to be honest with you, right at this moment, but I believe it was Zeus that raised up all the titans, and he had them fighting against the giants, and all this stuff happened. But it does say somewhere in that mix that he attacked Saturn, Saturn was his father, the biggest planet. And the rings of Saturn are the remnants of that battle. That's one of the theories of the rings of Saturn, and and it does make sense. Because Saturn's a very large planet, but the rings, if you added all that stuff and put it onto the planet, it would make something the size of Jupiter or bigger. So that's one side of the coin. Were they living on Saturn? They're living here. Well, I don't know if they were living here, but they sure as hell were here. Maybe they had no place else to go. Maybe they were from Mars, and they had nowhere else to go after Mars got hit by Venus. And because they're on top of everything. Here's what we got to do. Here's the key. We got to look into the layers of the Earth. They say they're dating the Earth by layers. Well, I could say, let's see if the red bed and the gray clay and the black cap is underneath these creatures, which it is, I know it is, which means they came after the Great Flood, I would say. Does that make sense to you?
Well, the fact that skeletal remains is pretty much intact, and it does not appear to have erosion effect of the Great Flood. The Great Flood occurred. Your theory has substantial evidence. Over.
Yeah, there's no question the Great Flood occurred. It was worldwide, 3 layers, and there was a red bed, which is the boiled flesh. And the same thing happened on Mars. I got a picture of Mars muscle sarcomere. This is just muscle from a gigantic creature on Mars. All the red blood has run out of it and turned into dust because there's no water up there to erode. But you can see the muscle sarcomeres, and they're saying this happened over millions of years. It did not. It was impacted at approximately 1500 BC. That's 3,700 years ago. And every culture on Earth had the same story, that they saw a brilliant fiery comet being, well, what they said was Jupiter gave birth to a fiery comet, which was later showed up to be Venus. And it took 7 days, apparently, to approach planet Earth, and it at that time cooked all the oceans, cooked all the landscape, burnt everything up as it was coming in. And the Colburn Bible and a whole batch of them say the oceans boiled, and even MIT had a paper out a couple of weeks ago, a month ago or so, said yes, the oceans did boil. However, they say it was because we almost got hit by something like 5 times the size of Mount Everest, something like that. Some claim of just some big thing hit us or almost hit us. Well, it was Venus that almost hit us. Now, Venus spins backwards at a tremendous electrical discharge. In addition to concussing with our atmosphere, caused all kind of havoc, and all the silicates came up off the ocean floor. I know we've talked about this many, many times, but this was the event that caused this, the Great Flood. Now, so you got the red bed of all the boiled flesh, literally boiled, just like you throw bodies into a vat and boil it. The first thing that comes out is the blood and the red fleshy stuff that coats everything, and then after that you get what they call gray clay, which is, you know, they call it marl. It's bits and pieces of the body and tendons and bits and pieces of trees and all that kind of stuff. And then, so that's settled on top of this mud, which was the blood, which is red clay. The redder the clay, the heavier the blood. That's all it is blood, eroded blood. Now, and flesh. Now, above that eroded, boiled off flesh is the gray clay that we just talked about. Now, above that was the fallout, and that's the black cap. And as a matter of fact, I have a footprint from that event right here somewhere.
Well, Roger, your allegorical historical accounts bridge on physical evidence and theoretical cultural allusions or stories. Do you agree?
100%. Now, I took most of my research from Velikovsky. He was considered insane. He had his book was on the #1 on the bestseller, New York Times bestseller list, #1 for 11 weeks in a row, and the academics were so upset they forced Macmillan, the publisher, to withdraw the book, and they did, and at that time they attacked him so bad, and they made everybody feel like they were just insanely an idiot if they even thought this guy had any credibility, and he destroyed him. And when I started into this, and I realized these giants are real. This is real. I got the real stuff. And of course I had a DNA test, the CAT scans, and I started to look back into the ancient texts and into the ancient what was written. And whoever did any research recently, if anybody, and it was only Velikovsky. And when I started to read what he had to say about Venus almost hitting Earth, and then how I started to look into Apollodorus and Hesiod and Ovid and all of those ancient texts, you know, Plato and Plutarch and every one of them. And the first two lines in Metamorphosis, which was Ovid, who wrote a gigantic epic work in the date of just as you came into the Christian era, Common Era, whatever, however you want to see it, the CE, at the time of Julius Caesar, and his account was based on everything that was written before him. And the first two lines out of 12,000 lines, the first two lines says, I intend to speak of forms transformed into the natural landscape by means of violence. And then he continued on to say they could transform anything into anything. Mushrooms, plants, rivers, constellations, planets, one sex to another, animals, anything they wanted. They could do anything they wanted because they controlled matter. They never die. So they're here somewhere. They're around somewhere. I don't know where they are. They're supposed to be immortal. And I'm going with all that stuff. I now believe not a word, basically, of what I was taught to repeat. And I'm not a real good repeater. So I just wanted to find out, is this right? This, you know, is there anything here? Once I found the giants, I was off to the races, man. And it's just, I never turned back. And it keeps tumbling down on me like a waterfall. Because everybody else in this world, well, not everybody, but anybody that's been interested in understanding, like you are, and like the people that come on my channel, which are really very, very few, actually, compared to these other channels that they just hype things that really there's no substance to them, but they're just spectacular. Well, I think the stuff I'm presenting is spectacular, and it's got substance. But anyway, all of this stuff needs to be re-examined. And that's what we're going to do. Hold on one second, Andy. Okay, I had a little interruption there. I'm back with Andy. And I just sent them pictures of these. These are cell phone pictures of this immediate vicinity off of the face of the earth here, looking out, and that is the moon. Now, you see the blue ridge around the top, and you see all those fields surrounding it. Those are magnetic fields. Now, then those fields are not being produced by the moon. The moon does not spin. A planet has to spin to create those magnetic fields, and there's certain fields are created due to certain spin. It's because of the bounce of the action as they move around in a circle. Now, and that's what these bouncing lines are. Those are, and that's why they're real tight when you're down close to the planet's center, and then they get weaker and weaker, and then they just dissipate. Now, you see the moon there, and Andy, I know you can see this picture. I sent it to him.
I'm looking at it right now. Go ahead.
All right. You see the white things that are on top of the moon. Now, you see all those white things, and then there's some purple looking. That they're right on top of the moon. Now they either anything that gives off light is energy. There's energy there. I don't know what it is, but there's some. Okay, I got Andy with me again. I called up Apollodorus because we're trying to figure out where did all of these monsters and giants and dragons originate? Where are they from? What were they originally? Were they live in here? I can't see. It's possible on this planet the size it is, and it is. You can see it from space station. So it's not. It is what it is, and you can see the sizes of these creatures are just absolutely enormous. So it does not make sense. Andy's right. He says, "How can you explain this?" I said, "I can't. I really can't explain it outside of explaining that the most crazy, insane things were alleged by Apollodorus. However, the Typhon event is absolutely certain. So do you accept the earlier statements that are, I mean, it's just as insane as a 1,200-mile long dragon attacking an 800-mile long fish, spitting fire at him and all of that insanity. But it's there. So the other things I can't see, do I accept them as real? Do I even consider them as being possible? Because I'm going to show you something that you would never consider possible. But the Earth is literally, I can't find anything anywhere in the universe that's not biological. I even feel that the sun was at one time a biological thing. Now, if you believe what I'm saying about Typhon, and I've shown Typhon over and over and over in the desert, and they have that exact account here. Let me read Typhon first. Now you see, let me just show you.
Roger, before you do that, I'd like to make a statement.
Go ahead.
My statement is that your philosophical research is the merger of allegorical historical documents from historical figures that use their own language to describe our modern scientific interpretations of events. You merge the two, much like Velikovsky, into a scientific description of actual events. We cannot dismiss nor degrade to simply storytelling. There is scientific physical evidence for that creature. It is post the flood occurred. And that creature is after the flood. But
All right, Andy, I got to put you on. I got to stop for a second here. My battery's running out. Hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that, my friends. We lost a little on a memory card, but I got Andy again, and he's going to summarize, and then I am going to show you the evidence of Apollodorus. Do we accept it, or do we fluff it off? And how much do we accept? How much do we deny? All right, so go ahead, Andy.
Roger, I'd like to set up your framework of your investigation. You are a philosophical investigator. You do not conduct actual experiments, except for your small experiments in physics. But you have combined historical, allegorical records with modern scientific data analysis, including DNA analysis. And many of your theories have substance, and they should be examined further by academics, who unfortunately reject you because of this whole idea of validation. Your category of investigation is allegorical, scientific.
Absolutely.
These historical authors. And I'd like you to read your current text and interpret it for us. Go ahead.
All right. As I said, and thank you, Andy, and I want to say something to you. I applaud you for being able to stand up for yourself and not be scared to talk about this. I got a whole bunch of other people that are extremely, educated and PhDs and all that stuff. And when I say, can we talk? Can I quote you on this? I said, no. I got one guy said, what are you trying to do? Ruin my life? I said, well, and it is. It's a nail against you. I mean, and it can be serious. But anyway. The story from Apollodorus goes back to the 2nd century BC. Now, he took all the earlier stuff from about 800, 900 BC when Hesiod was actually met on Mount Helicon by the Muses, which were the daughters of Zeus. They were the daughters of Zeus, who was supposedly God. And he was the god that was the sexual god. He was coming down having sex with everybody he could find. And he was Jupiter also. He was the planet Jupiter. But he could turn himself into anything they want. They turned themselves into the size of humans, came down, had sex with the humans, and then they gave birth to gigantic giants, miles tall. As all was recorded by Enoch, and it was recorded in a bunch of places, all removed because it was too much. too much for anybody to ever even think of. If you put that in there, they're going to think you people are totally insane. Take it out, get it out of there, so we can have at least have them look at it and think about this stuff. So all this stuff was removed. Well, who put it in? Well, Apollodorus. Apollodorus quoted everything. Now, let's just start way down at Typhon and the dragon. Because it starts off here, book 1 starts off with the birth of Zeus, then the war of the Titans, the Olympian gods, Apollo and Artemis, Demeter and Persephone. These are all gods and things. Now we get to the war of the giants and Typhon. This was when, well, I'll just read it to you. And then Prometheus, who was the father of Deucalion, who was Noah. And he goes on and on and on. I mean, the whole thing is in, and then book 2, book 3, all of this stuff. And then it goes into the Trojan Wars and all that stuff. Now, so where are we going to go? We're going to go to book 1.6, the War of the Giants and the Typhons. So boom, where are we here? 1.6.1. It starts to get all about the earth being vexed on account of the Titans. They brought forth the giants, whom she had by intercourse with the sky. She had it by the sky. These were matchless in bulk of their bodies, invincible in their might, terrible of their aspect did they appear, with long locks drooping from their head and chin, and with the scales of dragons for their feet. They were born, as some say, of Phalagrae, but according to others, of Pallene. All right, these are the dragons. All right, now, they darted rocks and burning oaks at the sky against the gods, I guess. Surpassing all the rest were Porphyrion and Alcinous, who was even immortal so long as he fought in the land of his birth. They killed him by dragging him outside, and Hercules was killing all of the ones working with Zeus. I'm going to cut right down to, it goes down to Hercules and Hera, and, you know, he smote somebody here, and Zeus smote him with a thunderbolt, and Hercules shot him dead with an arrow. As for the other giants, Apelles was shot by Apollo with an arrow in his left eye, and by Hercules in his right eye. Whew, this stuff is crazy, man. And I showed where there's I believe there's an arrow through the Sphinx's head. It went right through the top of his head. It came out his eyeball. And as you can see it there today. And nobody's ever really noticed it. So
That's amazing, Roger. That's an amazing taking of an allegorical document and finding physical evidence. That's your expertise. Go ahead.
Well, it's everywhere. It's just people are afraid to even talk about it. I'm not kidding you. People are scared. And I don't blame them, because you get assaulted like hell. You're just going to have to go on your own. I'm telling you, once I started, it was not good, and it's still not good. You know, people that would not look at it still won't look at it. And it's just it's a mindset that sets them up to say, that's it, I'm done, I am done with you. And that's just the way it works. Anyway, this is all about Zeus, who was Jupiter, and he was God. He was considered God. Now, here it comes down to 1.6.2. Let's get right down to the end of 1.6.2, where everybody's being killed. They're throwing red-hot missiles at each other of metal. One of them, she flayed the skin off of Pallas and used the skin to shield her own body. They chased through the sea by Poseidon. You know who he was. He was the god of the sea. Breaking off pieces of islands, threw it on him. Hermes, wearing the helmet of Hades, slew Hephaestus in the fight. Artemis slew Gratian. It was just all killing and thunderbolts. Now listen to this now. This is the very end of 1.6.2. It says, and the Fates, fighting with brazier clubs, killed Agrius and Thoas. The other giants, this was a battle between the giants and the gods. And the giants were the sons, were the children of Gaia, who was God. I mean, his earth. So the other giants, Zeus smote. He killed them all and destroyed them with thunderbolts. And all of them Hercules shot with arrows as they were dying. Now, here's the deal why Hercules was shooting all of them with arrows. A god can't kill another god, apparently, unless he has the help of a mortal. And Hercules was a 50-50. He was supposedly the son of Zeus and some extramarital affair. I don't really have the details. I wasn't there. But anyway, the other giants, Zeus smote and killed them all. He killed them all. Killed all the giants who were the children of Earth. And she was pissed. And here's what happened. It says, when the gods had overcome the giants. Don't forget, Zeus is the leader of these gods. He said, when the gods had overcome the giants, killed them all, Earth became enraged and had intercourse with Tartarus and brought forth Typhon. All right, now, some of these details I don't understand. They say they brought forth Typhon in Sicilia. He was a hybrid between man and beast. Now you have to take this, like you say, Andy, it's all details. You got to look for the details. It says, in size and strength, he surpassed all the offspring of Earth. Now that he's not bigger than Scorpzilla. There's no question about that. Scorpzilla much bigger, and Quetzalcoatl is much bigger. Are they offspring of Earth? I don't know. So in size and strength, he surpassed everything on Earth, every offspring of Earth. As far as the thighs go, which is the only part of him that's human, is the thighs, the only part. And this is what it says. It says, as far as the thighs go, he was of human shape, and he was of such prodigious bulk, he outtopped all the mountains. His head often brushed the stars. And then it goes on that he can reach one side of the west and one side of the east. And now they say he had 100 dragon's heads. I have not been able to find that. However, I did find some ancient text that said that Zeus slew him by, first of all, cutting off these little heads. I don't know where they are, 100 of them. That's a lot. But it says from the thighs, which is the only part was human, downward he had huge coils of vipers, which he does, and I found those, no question. His body was all winged and unkempt, hair streamed on the wind from his head and cheeks, which is very easy to see. Fire flashed from his eyes, no question. So great was Typhon, when hurling kindled rocks, he made for the very heavens, hissing and shouting great jets of fire from his mouth. Seen it. When the gods, listen to this, when the gods saw him rushing at heaven, when the gods saw him, they were scared. They made for Egypt in flight, and being pursued, they changed their forms into those of animals. And he got the fish. And it says, however, Zeus pelted Typhon at a distance with thunderbolts, and close quarters struck him down with an adamantine circle. And then it goes on to all kinds of crazy stuff that I got to be honest with you, I don't understand. Because it says that Zeus got caught and they cut his feet off or something. I mean, and Hephaestus nailed Prometheus's body to a cliff, and his guts were eaten, his liver was eaten every day by an eagle. And that was because Prometheus gave us fire. Now, he was supposed to be the... Go ahead, Andy.
Roger, can I pause here for just a second? I think of your interpretations, and your struggling has two factors. One is the translation from whatever the original text was written in, and I have a feeling it's either Egyptian or Greek, and your interpretation based on those translations. If that document were to be retranslated into modern language that we use with scientific jargon, it would be completely different. Now, here's one challenge I'd like to give you, is to input that text into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to translate it into modern scientific discussion. discussion based on all of the research you've done. I think you'll be surprised how correlative it is to the historical record.
Oh, it's exact. And here's the problem. Velikovsky had he knew all about this. He wrote all about this stuff. As the text was from every culture on earth had basically the same story of this great flood. And there's not a single culture, none, zero, that don't talk about giants and dragons and monsters and gods and heaven and hell and an afterlife. And, you know, they all have basically pretty damn close, same story. It's so close that it can't be discounted as just being an accident. There's no way. It's impossible. Dragons, monsters, giants, and I have found all of those things. 100% of those things I have discovered in material evidence, because that's what I do. I want to see some evidence. I laughed at this. I laughed at all that stuff. I thought Jesus was a joke. I laughed at God and all this. Show me evidence. Show me something. Nobody could, and they still can't. And the ones that are against God, they say there's no evidence. And I say, I have all kinds of evidence. And no, you're not, because it's not peer-reviewed.
Well, Roger, your base theory, as a result of your study, is that the universe that we live in is biological.
100%.
And you have found correlative evidence that's undisputable. Look at the layering theory that you have. Look at the mountains and how they're remnants of these giants. Look at the chemistry that you've examined, all correlating to the same stories. Here's my question. Were the majority of those stories performed on a different planet? The planet that the remnant is currently known as the asteroid belt. Over.
Well, that's the key. I have no clue, Andy, but I do know that everything that I have found in space, and I have a number of meteorites here that actually still have blood in them. But one's a lung and one's a tendon and one's a big, I think it's a human fingertip, a big one. And I have just sent them out for DNA tests to see. It's a cheap DNA test, so I don't know what we're going to find. But I'm on top of the Google Earth here. I'm coming up on the fish, the big fish here, which I know you can't see, Andy, but you know the fish. You've seen it a million times. And then above that is the dragon, which I just talked about Typhon. Now, don't forget, his throat was cut by Zeus with his great and mighty sword. Now, he's spitting down here at the fish, trying to kill him. Don't forget that they changed their bodies into those of animals. And that one there, Typhon went after. And there is some other text, ancient text, that talks about the god Pan tempting Typhon with a banquet of fish, and Ares was the one that turned himself into a fish, and he's the god of war. Now,
well, Roger, I would offer this as a correlative to my translation and interpretation theories, that those names are multiple descriptions for the same beings, but the names change. Over.
Yeah, exactly. But I cross-checked all of this stuff, and I know exactly what's going on here. Now, remember, he was spitting a great jet of fire and nastiness onto the fish, and here it is, and this is about as nasty as it gets. I know you don't see it, Andy, but I'm showing the venom that coming out of his beards. And the funny thing is, it comes out of his beard. There's a beard there's two beards that come down. One of them does something, I don't know what it's doing, but it's just strange looking. It's doing something. It's like some kind of a gland thing. And part of this noxious stuff runs over here to that beard. The other part comes to the other beard and is dispensed down towards that fish to kill it, and it actually ate through the scales, right down to his blood vessels. You see this? You don't, but these people will. These are the art. Go ahead.
Roger, your theory and the physical evidence that nothing is growing in North Africa in those chemical deposits is substantive.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. There is stuff growing in the red blood. Now, the red blood is the artery blood. And if you go in real close, you see the big ones are arteries, and then you have little ones that are the blood vessels down into the arterioles and down into the capillaries, and then they feed into the veins. And you can see all this stuff because it's been denuded of scales. It's been ripped, just toxified out to where there is no scales left. Now, we're going to come down here. When I said there is stuff growing, but it only grows where the red blood is. The red blood nurtures everything. It's like it's almost still alive. I'm down here right on top of the arteries, Andy, and there's a ton of little bushes here. They're just growing because they're growing on red blood cells. I'm not kidding you. And you can actually see it's like it's... Whoops.
Got it. Go ahead.
Is that you?
That was me. Go ahead.
All right, you all right? All right, now, here's all that blood coming down. There's stuff growing. It loves that stuff. But in the black, zero, nothing. Zero. There's no food left in it. It grows in where the red is. They sell blood meal so you can make your plants grow green. So now, we're going to go from the artery down to a lesser one. Then we're going to go from that lesser one down here till it feeds off to a whole bunch of other ones. Now let's see how it feeds off, and it ends up going into this black vein. So it feeds off, and then right down at the black vein is where it sucks it in. You see, this is like a whirlpool of sucking in fluids into the black vein. Veins, as I never knew this, but veins are completely porous. And the veins suck up all of that lymph, all of that used up fluids, except lymph. Now, if you could see this picture, Andy, or this Google, there's a million little lines here. And people say, oh, the people driving there. No, that is lymph ducts. Those are lymph. Lymph is the fluids that is the tiniest little fluid. And that fluid, I don't know if you know about the stuff I'm doing with the Russians, but they understand this fluid. It's interstitial fluid. It's from that layer that I discovered, really. It's from that fluid-filled highway. You know about that, Andy. I know you do because
yes, you mentioned it. I've seen the videos. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we've been working, Andy and I have been working with Marguerite over in Northern Ireland to try to help the kids with autism, and it seems to be helping. And the real key to this thing is the fluids that are in these tiny little tubes are the most important fluids in your body because they carry what's called ribosomes. The ribosomes are the enzymes that float around through your body. They're free floaters. But when they're needed, they pop open and they do chemistry that's just elegant, unbelievable. It's enzymes and catalysts. They work millions of times faster than the traditional chemistry that would happen. The same thing would happen, but it would take years. And this happens in less than a second, a million of them in a second. It'd take a year to do one. Without the enzymes, you don't function. Anyway, so let's get back to this. We can see that this was no question, zero question whatsoever that it was a creature. No question. And it fits exactly what they said. Typhon, who is a dragon, and here's his red flared eye right here. Here's his red flashing flared eye streaming back that they talk about. Here's his fluffy streaked flavor, all that stuff. He's spitting down at the fish, just like they said. This is runoff from his body. Now, here's where it gets to, as far as I'm concerned, this was after, and it can be dated easily by going up here and seeing, is this stuff sitting on top of the Triassic layer, which is worldwide. Yale agrees with this. It's a worldwide layer. 100% of the world's covered with this layer. Is this on top of that layer? That would mean it would have had to happen, it could have happened right at the same time, 3,700 years ago, or between then and now. That's all I can tell you. It's one or the other. You got to find out when this laid down on top. And I'm telling you right now, this is, as far as I'm concerned, almost 100% sure it's on top of the Triassic, but it is eroded. Now here's his thighs.
Roger,
yeah.
can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
Your physical evidence examination my question is, who observed it? Because the author that you quote was not alive during that time. What record did he copy of the witness that account has been substantiated by your physical evidence? Who observed it? Over.
Well, let me show you here. I'm going to do it on my screen here. Hesiod was the guy. They call him Hesiod. I go Hesiod. Now, here he was. He's 800 and something BC. Well, they go 776 BC. He was born. This is right after the Great Flood. The Great Flood only happened 1500 BC. Think of the time it would have taken to recoup, to become back to being able to become society again. Now, he's on Mount Helicon. And the muses come down here as he's tending his sheep. And they told him they wanted him to write the story of the history of the world. And he did. And it was called the Theogony. It's a poem by Hesiod describing the origins and the genealogies of the Greek gods, composed around 730 BC. It's also written in the epic dialect of ancient Greek, contains 1,022 lines. He told the muses that he could not write. And they said, don't worry, you'll write. And they gave him a laurel rod, they said. And he said he just started writing. And he wrote all kinds of stuff. And he wrote Theogony, which was the origin of everything, of the gods, their lineage, what they did. And then there was a bunch of other writers, obscure ones, but Hesiod was basically the main one. Theogony is the key to the whole deal.
Well, Roger, was he an eyeball witness? That's my question to you.
Well, I doubt it. At 800 BC, there was nobody alive obviously from the event of the cataclysm. However, the oral history and I can see, we know that there's 3 layers. It would have taken quite a while to recoup from that. Now, in Noah's account, it's supposed to be only 8 people survived. Well, that's not the case, I don't think. Is there any possibility that's true? There was a lot of survival, but it wasn't big creatures. There was nothing to eat. There was no place for them to hide. All the little people could get by, basically. But they didn't even, as Velikovsky records, the impact against our atmosphere was so severe that it caused the condensation of the hydrogen and oxygen in the atmosphere to turn into water, but it was boiling. So it flooded, first of all, cooking the atmosphere for 7 days coming down. Then it rained boiling hot water. And then it bounced off our atmosphere, went around and wiped Mars completely out, destroyed Mars. So there were people here, but I'm sure it was almost exclusively oral tradition after this, because it was worldwide. It wasn't just one place here or there. And it would have taken, like even Velikovsky wrote another book after Worlds in Collision, which was about the collision. He wrote the next book was called Worlds in Chaos, which was how crazy things were, and the fight for survival. And there was also the sea peoples. I'm sure you've heard of the sea peoples. They just arrived one day. Nobody knows where they came from. And they were, I believe, the remnants of Atlantis that were, they were seafarers. They were probably here, there, and around the world, and somehow they recouped, and all of a sudden they just swept in from the ocean and took over. And none of these things can be accounted for until you look at what Velikovsky recorded. And then everything just makes sense after that. But you got to get back to the fact that there were giants on the earth in those days. There were giants in the earth in those days. And this is where we come back to Apollodorus. This is a killer.
Okay, Roger, let's pause here for a second. The Jewish record was written by Moses. That's only one layer of information. What you're saying is there were multiple recorders by oral tradition, which means multiple survivors. And so we're going to take validity on that entire story. And your physical evidence that it was actually Venus sparring Mars, setting in orbit, which is in contra-rotation, makes perfect sense from the evidence. My question is, could many of those events have occurred in our solar system, in that third planet, which is now the asteroid belt? Over.
That's entirely possible. I can't discount that, Andy. I cannot discount that. That asteroid belt, if they say things are escaping from the asteroid belt, and they're talking about Bennu, you know what? Let me see if I can see if they say Bennu came from the asteroid belt, because Bennu is a heart. Did Bennu come from the asteroid? Because I think they called it an asteroid. Yes. Yes, according to current scientific understanding, asteroid Bennu most likely originated from the main asteroid belt located between Mars and Venus and Jupiter. Now listen to this, Andy. You can't see this, but I'm going to put on my screen what Bennu is. It's a heart. It's absolutely zero question. It is a heart.
You showed it to me before, and I believe that it's biological, A. B, it's probably a remnant of that planet or a creature that lived on that planet.
Has to be. It's a heart.
Many of these satellites, the asteroids, are biological remnants. Over.
Every single one that I have found in space, and I have many here that have come from space that are meteorites, still have blood in them. Iron meteorites have blood in them. They cut them in half and they end up with blood. You've seen those before. I've shown the iron meteorites. They cut them in half and they're saturated. Well, not saturated, but there's blood inside. And
Roger, I have seen you take a rock, apply distilled water, and it turns into a serum, which is blood.
Yeah, well, these are ones that come from space. Meteorites. Hold on one second. I'm going to call up a couple of meteorites on my screen so we can show people. Stay with me, Andy. Hold on.
Go.
Okay, I'm doing it now. Andy and I were just talking about, what is the meaning of all this? And, what is my job? And I got to be honest with you, this just fell on me. I'm not a Bible reader. I never really sat down and read it. But all kinds of things dropped on me when I found the giants. And this one did. It says Corinthians 1:26 to 2, brothers, consider the time of your calling. Not many were wise by human standards, not many were powerful, not many were of noble birth, but God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly and despised things of the world and the things that are not to nullify the things that are. That could be my resume. It's just what it is. And you know something? This really gives me a hope, because they say you get one chance. If you've been a sinner all your life and you realize, wow, this is real, I'm converting today, not one more minute of doing any of the bad stuff, they let you out. Now, if that's true, that would be fabulous. And how did I find my spiritual self? Well, listen to this. This really blew me away. Jesus said, if the flesh came into being because of spirit, that is a marvel, which we all have. We all have come into flesh because of some spirit. It's not just by accident. Now listen to this. This is the one that would make me very hopeful. He continues on by saying, but if the spirit, which I now have, came into being because of the body which I used to find my spirit, that is a marvel of marvels. That's how I'm taking it. I can distort my own stuff. But it makes sense to me.
Yes, Roger, your explorations have opened up and revolutionized science as we we know it. It's taken the mask and merged ancient and current knowledge into one gigantic story.
It's just as what it was written. Well, let's go back to Apollodorus. I just called up some dragon scales here in the desert, and this guy Myron that does all his geology, he says this is nothing. And he's looking at some lump of dirt in the ground. I said, what about these things? These things. Oh, those are flat irons. I said, well, how did they get there? Oh, they're everywhere. I said, well, how did they get there? Oh, they just all the little water dribbles down and it makes those bumps. I said, no. Which is impossible. The things that we hear from these geologists, it's just silly. Absolutely silly. Anyway, where was I going with this, Andy? Refresh me, buddy.
Roger, I'm going to make a statement. I want you to analyze it. The mountains that we see are the remnants of those creatures sent from that planet. They came here and they died after the flood, or before the flood. Over.
I agree with that 100%. No question whatsoever. They did, just like Ovid said, they made the planet. Even Jesus said, the earth is the planet, the world is a corpse. And if you discover the world, you discover a corpse. He also said, if you discover the world, you discover the body. Now, the body, I have discovered the body in its most intimate details, if that's what he means. He also said, we are the light. We are the children of the light. That's where we come from. We come from the place where the light comes of its own accord. And the only place I know of that like that is the sun. That's the only place where the light comes of its own accord. Now, where was I with Apollodorus? Hold on. All right, well, anyway, asteroid Bennu is a heart. Of that, there is no question. Now, with Apollodorus, let's go back to Apollodorus.
Roger, you also found another asteroid which a satellite was sent out to take pictures, and you found that it was a bone.
Yeah, it's a hip bone, and it's got a huge, gigantic artery that when the sun hits it just right, it shoots out polycyclic hydrocarbons. You know what those are? The same thing that come off your gas grill when you cook a nice roasty sirloin or something.
Yeah.
That's exactly the same. And the astronauts say space smells like steak. There's nothing here that it's hard to understand. It's just hard to let yourself understand it. It's not hard to understand. It's very simple. There's nothing but biology. Never was anything but biology. The gods were the gods. They own matter, and they can do anything they want with it, and they will never die. So they're here somewhere, and nobody knows anything about anything. And I think they run academia. I honestly believe that that's the truth. What they have done is forced everybody to believe that if they don't go to them to get a piece of paper, whatever they tell them to say, they have to say. It doesn't matter what they tell them, and what they're telling them isn't right. They know it's not right. So they're telling them to say something that supports their point of view. And if you don't say it, they fail you and destroy you, keep your money, and tell everybody you're an idiot. But if you don't have the piece of paper, you're already an idiot, because they tell everybody, anybody who doesn't have this piece of paper is an idiot. You don't have the degree, you're an idiot. And that's why they say, oh, Roger, you don't have a degree. I got so many freaking degrees. It's, they're not really degrees, but they're, let's call them certifications in different areas. Now, you don't have to go for one little thing because you never understand anything else. It's called interdisciplinary research. You have to understand everything or don't understand anything. And you have to start with dipole electron flood theory and work up from there. But anyway, going back to Apollodorus.
I wouldn't call it research. You know what you do? You do philosophical exploration substantiated by physical evidence. That's what you do.
I'll take it. Now, let me see. Here we go. Apollodorus. Now, here's where you get crazy. Here's where it's seriously insane. Is where you start right from the beginning of Apollodorus. And this is book 1, the theogony, birth of Zeus. This is the god that we're talking about that ran our solar system. And he apparently went against the big god, because he's the god that said, come on, let's go down and have sex with all the women. And that's what he did. He came down and they set up shop on Mount Olympus and Mount Helicon and all in these mountain areas, and they set up palaces and they had sex parties. So this is all I can tell you is this is what it says. Book 111. Sky was the first who ruled over the whole world. So the world was some kind of ball of whatever, and the sky was around it, and it wedded the earth. In other words, they had sex. And he begat first the 100-handed, they were called, Briarus, Gaius, and Cotus, who were unsurpassed in size and might, each of them having 100 hands and 50 heads. Now after that, she's given birth to monsters. After these, Earth bore him the Cyclopses. Now don't forget, these are Earth's children. She's looking at them as children. Even they're freaking monsters, she's still seeing them as her children. And she was pissed off when Zeus killed them all. So she gave birth to the Cyclopses, Argus, Stephus, and Bronchus, whom each had one eye in his forehead. We all know about these stories. But them, he took all these and bound them up and cast them into Tartarus, which is in the center of Gaia, who is Earth. That's where Tartarus is. It's down there, and I think it's there. They just said the other day they think there's some cavity in the Earth that they can't explain. Now, and it says in this text, it's about, well, anyway, let me just continue. So he's got Cyclopses. She gave birth to the Cyclopses. But he hated them. They made too much noise. And Sky bound and cast them into Tartarus, to a gloomy place in Hades, as far distant from Earth as Earth is distant from the sky. So the Earth is here. Down inside the Earth, just as far as from way up in the heavens, is Tartarus. And I think it is there. We have no idea what's in the center of the Earth. Iron core, that's an absolute nonsense. Now, again, he begat children by Earth. He got the Titans, the ocean, Cous, Hyperion, Crius, Iapetus, and the youngest of all, Cronus. Also he had the daughters, the Titanides, they were called, Taius, Rhea, Themis, Misa, Phaeophe, Diona, and Thea. These are moons and planets and stuff. But Earth grieved at the destruction of her children, who he had been cast into Tartarus, persuaded the Titans, which are her children, to attack their father, and gave Cronos, one of these Titans, an adamantine sickle to cut off his testicles. And they all but Ocean was scared. They all attacked him, and Cronus cut off his father's genitals and threw them into the sea. And from the drops, the flowing blood, were born the Furies, Alecto, Thiophysine, and Megara. And having dethroned their father, they brought up their brethren who had been hurled down to Tartarus, and committed the sovereignty to Cronos. So now Cronos is the big guy. He's the one that's in charge now, because he took up the sickle and cut his balls off. Now, he is associated, I believe, to Saturn. I believe Cronos is Saturn. Now, let me just try one thing real quick. Is Cronos Saturn? Yes, Cronos is the Greek god for Saturn. So now we got Cronos being Saturn, who is now in charge. He's the big guy. And under him is all these other gods and Titans and all that stuff. So, but Cronos was scared that one of the rest of them was going to take him, so he locked all of them back up again. So Cronos again bound and shut them all back up in Tartarus, and he wedded his sister. He wedded his sister, who was Rhea. Since both earth and sky foretold that he would be dethroned by his own son, he would swallow his offspring as soon as they were born. His firstborn, Hesiod, he swallowed. Then Demeter and Hera, and after them Pluto and Poseidon. He swallowed them all. But Rhea, his wife, got pissed off. So enraged, Rhea repaired to Crete. So she hid out in Crete when she had Zeus. So she bore Zeus and left him there and brought him forth to a cave, hid him out there. She gave him to the Curetes and to the nymphs.
Hey, Roger?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to break at this point because you've established your main theory. And the main theory is based on the following axioms. One, our solar system / galaxy is biological. Two, many of the allegorical events that historians from previous ages have recorded actually happened. We have physical evidence of many of those events. What we need is a current interpretation of those events in our current vernacular. Over.
That's what I'm doing. That's all I'm doing, Andy. I'm just saying, here's how I interpret these written accounts. And, I try to put them in some kind of perspective according to what I can find materially to back up what appears to be what the actual events were, instead of just sort of like, right now, the current thinking on this is just all mythology, it's all nonsense and ridiculous. And they disregard the evidence. I don't disregard evidence ever, never, ever, zero, never. But I want the evidence, and I want it to be solid, and I want it to be valid, and I don't want to puff something up that's not real. And I don't want something that is real not to get seen. That's all it is. And right now, there's no stomach for reality. It's to back up whatever you have said your theory is, no matter how ridiculous the new script and narrative, because it changes every day now. I'm seeing every single day. Now we just figured this out. Well, yesterday we just figured this out. And, it goes on and on. It's every day is something
Roger,
new.
what you're doing, have you ever seen somebody take a puzzle and turn it upside down so that you don't see the picture? You see the puzzle pieces in the same color, the underneath color. That's what you're doing. You're putting the pieces together, not looking at the picture side. You're only looking at the puzzle pieces and where they fit. Over.
Yeah, well, they want to find whatever they find. I just had a guy comment. I've been talking about carbon-14 today. Absolutely no possible way to have any idea, none, zero, because of enzymes and so forth, of these creatures that are buried in the ground. It's called nucleophilic invasion substitution. I know you know about it. It's nucleosynthesis, which means it changes the nucleuses of these atoms. It depends on where they were. Were they close to enzymes? Were they close to silicates? Were they close to, different metals? All of those things are transport mechanisms to make change. And enzymes are the biggest change maker of all. So this guy sends me this thing. He says, you're right about the carbon dating. He said, this guy which did this kind of stuff, had something carbon date, his chicken bones off his table. And they had it at 130 million years old.
Well, Roger, your best evidence of your transition is the German tank that was found in the bog that had turned from steel into stone. Do you remember that picture?
Yes, I do. But you know what? I think that might not be what it is interpreted to be. I think they poured concrete on these things so they couldn't be used for war again. I did a little more investigating on that, and I think that's what they did with that. But I'm not certain of that
I'm going to
either.
give you one more final thought before I pull over. That is that there's a theory that the Mayans were actually people that lived on Mars during the cataclysms when Venus collided. Over.
Well, I don't see any reason that's not true. You've seen the pictures I show of the tire tracks on Mars. I mean on Earth here across those tendons, right?
Yes.
And that's just what it is. They were here everywhere. Let's see, tire tracks.
That those people, the Mayans particularly, were brought over from Mars during the cataclysm, and they settled in Central and South America. Over.
I see no reason to dispute that. I just called up 3 pictures here, Andy. I'm going to show them in a second, which you will not be able to see, but these people will, and here they are. This is in Fuerte de San Piata, Bolivia. These tire tracks and this huge, like tank treads, this was when they were cutting these slabs and transporting and making walls. This was a tendon from a gigantic, enormous creature. It was wet when they were cutting the slabs. And when they put them in the walls in the back, that's why they fit so perfect. There was no problem with with the fit of them because they were just perfect.
I've got it, Roger. I've got to go. I've seen those pictures. I agree with you 100% in your interpretation. It's been an amazing conversation, and I hope you edit it so that people...
Whoops, I see you got another call coming in. I'm going to let you go, Andy. I appreciate your time, buddy, and it's going to go up on a video, man.
Perfect. Send me the link. We'll talk.
All right, great. Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye now.